Hello there and welcome back to Russia in Context. The second Saturday of July is the day of Moscow transport, when the main event is a parade of retro streetcars which finishes at Chistye Prudy, where the vehicles are open to walk through. So let's go have a look at some historical trams. All of these people here standing in line on both sides, they were just waiting for free ice cream. Now, the first two streetcars aren't trams per se, but they still traveled the rails. This blue one, built from 1970 until 1984, and which was in use until 2003 here in Moscow, this was used to transport rails and other construction materials for building and maintaining tram lines. It could move rails up to 12.5 meters in length and carry loads of up to 12 tons. This next vehicle was built and in use over the same time period as the previous one, although instead of construction, this vagon vyshka was used to inspect the quality of the overhead electrical cables that fed power to the streetcars, as well as to tow away trams that were in need of help. Here we come to our first vehicle designed for actual passengers, and it is the newest one on display here. This tram is nicknamed a Cobra due to its many sections. They began production in 2007, and Cobras made their first appearance on the streets of Moscow the following year, though I personally have never seen them. The max capacity for a tram like this, on paper at any rate, is nearly 200 people. Vents in the roof provide additional ventilation, as you will see in many of the other trams moving forward. And like most modern transport in the city, it's traversable from end to end. Now this tram right here is going to be instantly recognizable to anyone who has visited what we might call modern Russia. This is the 71608 KM, produced in the Chelyabinsk Oblast from 94 until 2007, and it was in use here in Moscow until 2016, although if you do travel to other Russian cities around, you'll be sure to see them still making the rounds. The distinctive wood panel style interior is pretty unforgettable, and though the steps were not always the easiest for older individuals to navigate, the doors are wider than most of the older models that we'll soon see, because passengers were kind of allowed to enter and exit freely through whichever door they wanted. Okay, this next streetcar is a later model Tatra, but only 6 of this specific model were ever in use here in Moscow. We're going to come back to Tatras in a minute, but right now I just want to take a moment to talk about the importance of trams to the public transit system here in Moscow. While many people immediately think of the metro when they think of getting around the city, trams and trolleybuses, which have recently been completely replaced by electric buses, they played a key role in connecting the fast-developing areas of the city. The network, which is entirely interconnected, saw most of its growth in the post-war period through to the 1970s, with the majority of the tram network concentrated in the northeastern, northwestern, and southern regions of Moscow. Streetcars were also vital in allowing citizens to travel between metro lines without having to go all the way to the ring line in the center. Lastly, a point which is often overlooked, which is traveling by tram is altogether more pleasant because you're above ground and you can actually enjoy the views of the city around you.
Давай зайдем в поезд. Билетики, наверное, продавали. Билетики туда клали.
Okay, coming back to the Tatra here, we can see how tickets were sold. Passengers would place their money in the top, then turn a knob, which would spit out a ticket, and the money would fall down and into this little machine. In this version of the Tatra, there are two such machines, kind of allowing for more freedom in entering and exiting the tram.
Вот, так правильнее. Ты сказала 2000. Это был Чехословак.
Now we get to the version of the Tatra that many who grew up in the late Soviet Union will recognize. In fact, many Russians believe that the Tatra was produced in this country because they were everywhere. But if you couldn't guess from the name, they weren't. The Tatra was a line of trams produced in Czechoslovakia from the 1960s through the 1990s. This specific model right here, the T3, was made from 63 until 76, and it was actually here in Moscow in use until 1996. Just a quick look into the T2 version of the Tatra. One detail I wanted to point out is that this is the first streetcar which had rubber floors, which, made it much easier to clean out in the wetter, dirtier months.
До сих пор не убрали.
Now this is the RVZ-6. First, look at the floors. Those deep grooves are there to deal with the snow and slush that I just alluded to. Here you can also see a different ticket machine, but I wanted to call attention to the glass domes here on the ceiling. They're the same as you would find in old Soviet metro wagons, and they're there to cover the light bulbs. but not just to protect them from accidentally getting broken. No, these old trams had such coverings to prevent them from being pilfered, as bulbs could sometimes be hard to come by, especially in the earlier days of the Soviet Union. Here where the driver sat, take a look at those metal rods near the windshield, vertical on both sides. Those are heaters both for the driver and to keep the window from frosting over in the colder months. These trams right here were in use only from 1960 until 1966 here in Moscow, at which time they were all donated to Tashkent after an earthquake there, as kind of like a relief gift. Moving along, we have the MTV 82, produced from 1947 until 1961. What makes this model particularly interesting is the fact that the parts used for it were also used for buses in that same time period. In fact, with this in mind, it really does resemble a bus, especially the windows and the positioning of the seats. It's worth noting that this was the first model of tram also that had automatic doors. Alright, now we're getting into the older streetcars. This next one is a Chistye Prudy. In production at the same time as the last tram, what grabs the eye straight away is the wooden interior. These older models were obviously much less comfortable, but they were also much louder, both for passengers and passers-by. The Chistye Prudy had manual doors, something all the older trams further on feature. So on the day of the parade, this next streetcar was extremely popular and for good reason. If you're a fan of Soviet cinema, this tram can be seen in such films as «Место встречи изменить нельзя», «Покровские ворота», and «Холодное лето 53-го». It's even the one which decapitated Berlioz after Annushka spilled the oil at the opening of Bulgakov's Master and Margarita. Now, I'm not sure how that happened, as there are special metal guards to push people out of the way and keep them from suffering such a fate, but, you know, it happened.
Моторный, колонновский прицепной. В чем их различие? Колонновский моторный первый, он у нас имеет тяговые двигатели, то есть это наша тяговая лошадка, да, и мотор-компрессор, который качает воздух в пневматическую систему торможения в поезда. Вот этот у нас тормоз, это механический. Для чего он служит? Первое его назначение это как экстра. Если у нас, не дай бог, случались какие-то нештатные ситуации на линии, когда вагончики соединялись,
I personally opted to not go through the ordeal of plotting through the motor half of the tram, so if you'd like to see more of it, go check out one of those films. This penultimate tram is known as Annushka, and it is an example of the first electric-style tram in Russia. On the side, you can see a pre-revolutionary coat of arms and text which says entering and exiting while in motion is prohibited. Note the Latin letter I, which disappeared from Russian orthography after the Bolsheviks took power. Also, this message was kind of important as the doors were manual and speed was not that great, so it was quite easy for people to jump on and off as they pleased, especially to avoid payment. In most of these older trams, there was a special seat by the back door, which was actually the entrance, where the ticket conductor sat, and the exit was actually in the front of the streetcar. This outer area here would have been quite chilly most of the year, although inside would not have been much better as these first trams were unheated. That said, the windows could be completely removed to make it, tolerable during the summer.
Можно брать? Ну что, пойдем сюда, посмотрим, что там такое. Пошли посмотрим. Ну, отвечайте мелочь, видишь, смотри, чего поднять. А вот смотри. Да.
If we take a look in at the driver compartment, on the left we have the accelerator, in the middle is the brake, and that wheel on the right is the manual brake, which could be cranked really hard and fast if there was some sort of emergency. Kind of unrelated, but that line across the street is for seafood restaurant Starik i Moryo, which is Russian for the old man in the sea. The last few times I've been in this area, there's always been a line like that for people waiting to dine, so I guess the place must be pretty good. Alright, now this last tram here is a special one. Not only is it the oldest, but it's also non-electric. It was built in 1872 and was pulled by a team of 4 horses. Now, by 1900, when the first electric tram had appeared in the city, there were 94 kilometers of horse-drawn railways here in Moscow, with over 240 wagons moving across 25 different lines. 2,000 horses existed solely to pull passengers about the city, and they continued to do so up until 1912, even as electric trams had become more widespread. Unfortunately, we got here a little bit late today, so we missed the horses, but you can imagine what that might have been like. Now that we've had a close look and been through most of the trams, let's see them in action. And with that, the parade of trams has come to an end, as well as this video. If you enjoyed it, click subscribe if you're not subscribed, give it a thumbs up, hit the bell, click all the buttons, there's a lot of them here on YouTube. It's kind of fun. I'll be back soon with more videos from here around the city as well as out of the city. Until then, this has been Russia in Context. Thanks for watching.